We're diving into a Supreme Court case that asks a really important question. What happens when you fight a long legal battle and you win, but the victory doesn't look anything like you expected? It's a fascinating story about the difference between being right and getting what's right.
And that's the big question at the heart of the story of Archimedes Bernal. His case against his former employer went all the way to the Philippine Supreme Court. And it's just a perfect example of how complex and, frankly, how surprising labor law can be. So let's start at the beginning. Our story kicks off with an employee, Archimedes Bernal, who got dismissed from his job at a construction and engineering company called McConnell Dowell Phils, Inc. Now, he was convinced that his firing was completely unfair, so he didn't just let it go. He decided to fight it. He took them to court, and that one decision kicked off a years-long battle that would wind its way through the entire court system. Okay, so let's track this journey. Bernal's case didn't just land in one court. Oh no. It had to methodically climb up the entire legal ladder, starting right at the bottom rung. First up, the labor arbiter. That's the first stop for these kinds of disputes. They sided with Bernal, finding he was illegally dismissed. Then, the case went to the National Labor Relations Commission. Same result. They upheld the decision. And after that, it went to the Court of Appeals, who also affirmed the ruling. Every single level agreed with him. So you see what's happening, right? The verdict of illegal dismissal just kept getting confirmed over and over again. Can you imagine the momentum his case had? 3 different courts, all saying the same thing. It really seemed like a slam dunk. And so, after all that, the case finally lands at the Supreme Court. This is it. The highest court in the land, the absolute final stop where the definitive binding decision gets made. And guess what? The Supreme Court sided with him too. They officially and finally declared that Bernal's dismissal was illegal. A huge victory. Case closed, right? Well, this is where things get really interesting. Because this is where the story takes a huge twist. You see, winning the case is one thing, but what the court actually decides to do about it, the remedy, that's a whole different ballgame. All right, take a look at this, because this is the critical twist, all laid out. That first row, illegal dismissal, the court affirmed it. Check. But look at what happens next. The original award was reinstatement, getting his job back. The Supreme Court modified that to separation pay. And those moral and exemplary damages, gone, deleted completely. So he won, but the prize totally changed. So what's the big deal here? Well, reinstatement means McConnell Dowell would have had to give Bernal his old job back. But the court basically said, you know what? After a long, ugly legal battle like this, forcing an employee and an employer back together, it's just not practical anymore. So they ordered a payout, separation pay, instead. Okay, that explains the job part. But what about the money for damages? You know, the money meant to compensate for the stress and punish the company's bad behavior. Why would the court just get rid of that, especially after they agreed the company acted illegally? Well, the court's own words give us the answer. And this is the key phrase right here. Not attended with bad faith. That's the legal standard. For a court to award those kinds of damages, it's not enough for the employer to be wrong. They have to prove the employer acted maliciously, dishonestly, or in some totally arbitrary way. So let's put that in plain English. The court basically said, yep, the company was wrong to fire him. The dismissal was illegal. But they couldn't find evidence that the company did it out of malice. The company didn't follow the rules, for sure, but their actions didn't cross that very high legal bar for bad faith. So what can we all learn from this? This case has some incredibly important lessons, whether you're an employee trying to understand your rights or an employer trying to follow the rules. This case is really a masterclass in the fine print of employment law. It shows us that getting a court to declare an illegal dismissal is really just step one. The next question, what's the right remedy, is a completely separate decision. And that crucial difference between an employer being wrong versus an employer acting in bad faith, well, that makes all the difference in the world when it comes to the final outcome. And it leaves us with this final thought to chew on. In the workplace, what does justice really look like? Is it just about winning, about proving you are right? Or is it about finding a resolution that's fair, practical, and legally sound for everyone who's caught in the middle?